In the shadow of skyscrapers, there is a life that no one wants to see: the excluded, the sold, the silenced. Those living on the streets are not victims of fate, but the conscious remnants of the system. America is silent, but we are speaking out. 1. Trump's final blow to the homeless. Presidential order criminalizing street life. With a presidential decision taken in 2025, living on the streets in America effectively became a crime. The measure, signed into law by Donald Trump, involved the forced eviction of homeless people from around federal buildings. The decision was justified on the grounds of public order and visual cleanliness. However, what was actually done was to remove thousands of people from the streets without offering any alternatives. The police carried out operations on tent camps at night. All personal belongings of the homeless, including blankets, IDs, and medicines, were thrown away. Many people were physically assaulted during the intervention. The implementation was not just a physical cleanup, but the erasure of homelessness from social memory. Instead of protecting these people, the state pushed them outside the system. No alternative shelter was provided, no social support was offered. This decision was not a step toward solving homelessness, but a strategy to make it an invisible crime. In America, poverty was no longer just a crisis, but a punishable condition. 2 bodies sold for survival. The unseen struggle for survival of homeless women. For homeless women, night is not just darkness, it is bargaining time. Thousands of women with nowhere to stay face a choice every night: be raped on the street, or accept rape in advance and sell their bodies for a bed. This is not a temporary gain, but a systematic necessity. Women often give their bodies in exchange for drugs, sometimes just for a warm blanket, sometimes just to avoid being alone. These shelter deals offered in exchange for sexual services do not officially exist. Neither these women nor the violence they experience appear in government records. When the shelters close their doors, these women fall prey to the rules of male-dominated streets. The only way to stay safe is to share a man's bed. This is not a choice. A T is the dirtiest and quietest way to survive. T starts anew every night. And when morning comes, it is erased as if it never happened. 3. They shed blood for the state but were thrown out onto the streets. The betrayal of silent veterans. Tens of thousands of veterans who gave years of their lives to the U.S. military and returned from the battlefronts with physical and psychological wounds are now living on the streets. According to 2024 data, the number of homeless veterans in America has exceeded 37,200. Most of these individuals served in hot conflicts such as Iraq and Afghanistan and were promoted as the country's honorary heroes. However, after their service, the system quickly pushed them out. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic pain, substance abuse, social adjustment problems. The support offered by the state against these problems is inadequate and often inaccessible. Accessing the healthcare system requires long waiting lists, procedures, and paperwork battles. Housing assistance quotas are limited and competition is high. Veterans become the losers not only of war but also of peacetime. The promises made to them are not kept. They are thanked and forgotten. They are left on the streets, along with their honor. 4. Drugs as shelter, sex as bed, the quietest chain of abuse on the streets. For homeless women, shelter is no longer a right, but a bargaining chip. Women who are addicted to drugs are often forced into sexual relations in exchange for drugs to avoid sleeping on the streets. This situation is not limited to street corners. It is also part of the chain of abuse in some shelters. Shelter workers or influential men in shelters expect favors from women in exchange for a safe bed. A bed, drugs, or protection is offered, in exchange for the body. Those who say no are thrown out, and someone else who accepts takes their place. This cycle continues day after day. Women either face abuse or remain silent to survive. The police often do not intervene in such cases. The rate of complaints reflected in official reports is low because most women know that speaking up means losing their right to shelter. Silence becomes a rule for survival. 5. From trash to table, homeless people poisoned under the guise of aid. In the U.S., aid organizations and food banks collect expired or soon-to-expire products and distribute them to homeless people. This system is promoted on paper as social responsibility against food waste. However, in practice, there is a serious lack of oversight and control. The distributions include meat products with broken cold chains, moldy bread, and canned and dairy products with erased expiration dates. Packaging is often done quickly by untrained volunteers, further increasing health risks. An incident in San Diego in 2023 exposed the dark side of the system. After distributing sandwiches to homeless people, 43 people were hospitalized due to food poisoning. However, no criminal proceedings were taken against the organization providing the aid. This is because the system is protected by the image of providing aid, and is not questioned. In reality, the homeless are not merely recipients of aid in this chain. They are consumers whose voices are unheard and who feel no obligation to hold anyone accountable. As long as they remain silent, even poison is considered aid. 6. Cleanup operation or human hunt. Those caught between the police and the streets. In many large cities, homeless people are being erased not from the streets, but from the system. Municipalities are dismantling homeless encampments under the guise of cleanup operations, but these operations often involve violence. Policies implemented in cities like New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco target people living on the streets. Tents are forcibly dismantled with police presence, belongings are collected and thrown away, and people are evicted from areas while they are asleep or vulnerable. Homeless individuals' personal belongings, identity documents, medications, memories, are destroyed without any record being kept. No alternative shelter is offered. People are pushed from one street to another. While these practices aim for visual cleanliness, they are in fact a violation of human rights. The housing problem is not being solved, it is simply being suppressed out of sight. The police do not provide social services. They only clean up the disturbing images from the streets. But these images are real lives. 7. The disaster hidden behind the numbers. The reality of homelessness in the U.S. is being concealed. According to official institutions, the number of homeless people in the U.S. is reported to be around 770,000. However, this figure is far from reflecting the reality. Independent studies reveal that millions of homeless people are excluded from statistics due to the narrow definition and measurement methods applied by the state. The actual number is well over 1 million. This underreporting is not accidental, it is a deliberate policy. Because high numbers expose the failure of social services, the collapse of housing policies, and the insensitivity of the system. In the U.S., the homeless count is conducted through a one-night field study called Point in Time. Only on one night a year, those staying in shelters and those visibly on the streets are counted. Families sleeping in cars, young people temporarily staying on a friend's couch, undocumented immigrants hiding in vacant buildings are not included in this calculation. Thus, the numbers are kept low, and reports create an illusion of improvement. Yet the crisis on the streets grows every year. Problems that are ignored are never solved, they only deepen. Homelessness in the U.S. is no longer just a humanitarian crisis, it is a systematic cover-up operation. 8. The $1 billion lie. Where is the housing money in Los Angeles? In 2022, the city of Los Angeles announced that it had allocated a $1.2 billion budget to reduce homelessness. The projects presented to the public promised that thousands of homes would be built and permanent housing would be provided for people living on the streets. However, despite the passage of time, the number of completed homes fell far short of expectations. The average construction cost per apartment exceeded $832,000. In some projects, this figure reached up to $900,000. Funds were transferred to large construction companies, and projects were delayed for years. Expenditures were not audited, and the budget was not disclosed transparently. The few units that were built did not reach most of the homeless, because the conditions were harsh, the acceptance criteria were high, and the quotas were limited. It was clear who won in this process: the companies that won the tenders, the construction lobbies, and the consulting firms. It was also clear who lost: thousands of people who continue to live on the streets. The money kept flowing, but there is still no solution in sight. 9. Not shelters, torture chambers. Dark rooms quietly approved by the state. Shelters opened for homeless people in the U.S. appear to be symbols of aid when viewed from the outside. However, the situation is completely different for those who step inside. Most shelters operate in crowded, stuffy, and unhygienic conditions. Beds are crammed together, and there is no privacy. Sleepless nights under camera surveillance, constantly lit lights, shouting, arguments, and an atmosphere of threats turn these places into an environment that is even less safe than the streets for many homeless people. Despite documented cases of physical violence, sexual harassment, and psychological pressure in some shelters, these places remain open. Those who complain are either silenced or thrown out. For most people, shelters are not a salvation, but a second trauma. The state ignores these conditions because shelters are presented as a solution on paper. Yet the reality inside is a silent and systematic collapse. 10. Not a lab, a shelter. Universities using homeless people as test subjects. Some universities in the US are using homeless individuals as test subjects in unethical research. These studies are often conducted under titles such as social resilience, addiction tendencies, or eating habits. However, a significant portion of these studies are conducted without written consent, payment, or proper disclosure. Homeless individuals are lured into the research environment with the promise of a hot meal or shelter. In a 2021 study conducted by a university in Los Angeles, participants were subjected to experimental diets without medical follow-up. Any health issues that arose were ignored. In such projects, homeless people are ostensibly volunteers but are in fact coerced. The names of these people do not appear in academic articles presented to the public. Their voices are not heard. While universities gain prestige, homeless people are merely data points. 11. Big Pharma's street army. Slaves made addicted by prescription drugs. Thousands of homeless people living on the streets in the US are addicted individuals. This addiction often begins not with illegal substances, but with prescription drugs. Highly potent drugs such as OxyContin, Xanax, and Adderall were readily prescribed to millions of Americans for a period of time. The companies that produced these drugs aggressively marketed their products, despite knowing the risk of addiction. Major pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharma offered incentives to doctors, increasing the number of prescriptions. Ultimately, thousands of people became addicted to these drugs and ended up on the streets, like anyone else who lost their insurance or their job. What began with prescriptions continued on the streets with illegal versions. Homeless people are the most visible victims of a public health crisis created by the pharmaceutical industry. However, the system views these people as addicts. It ignores the root cause. The problem is personalized, and responsibility is not placed on the companies. 12. Migration, identity, and silence. The neglected existence of undocumented homeless people. A significant and rapidly growing portion of the homeless population in the U.S. consists of undocumented immigrants. These individuals are mostly from Latin America, having crossed the border illegally or whose visas have expired. They cannot receive social assistance, apply for housing support, or access any government agency without identification. In the U.S. system, the right to housing begins with an ID card. A person without documentation is, officially, non-existent. Therefore, undocumented migrants living on the streets face two separate threats every night: homelessness and the fear of deportation. If they are attacked, they remain silent. If they encounter the police, they flee. Because the system does not protect them, on the contrary, it punishes their existence. These people are often exploited in illegal jobs, receive low wages, and frequently fall into human trafficking and sexual exploitation networks. Even most aid organizations cannot support these individuals due to official protocols. As a result, a group of people living both homeless and nameless on the streets of the United States emerges. They are alive, but in the eyes of the state, it is as if they never existed. To exist, one must first be visible. Undocumented homeless people, however, have no chance of being seen.